Hey Dan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, love to always hear from a fellow investor that is also a house hacker. But before we dive into that, let's start off with your background. How did you become a real estate investor?
The journey for me um, started relatively after I graduated college. I was always interested in the thought of real estate. I always had you know, I always had it in the back of my mind, and thought of it as such a cool kind of different way to really build wealth beyond just like kind of the traditional options. It always kind of lingered in there. And then once I finished up my master's degree, I came back to Boston. It was in Georgia for school, and I came up back to Boston, and I was just so over the thought of how much rent could possibly be and continue to be. And for me, it was just like, I knew how the prices were to buy. And, everyone tells you how crazy you are to buy at prices this high and everything. But when I just kind of started thinking, like, man, I have spent a lot in rent already in just like a few short years out of college and stuff. Like, what's this going to continue to look like, if I rent till I'm 30 or 35 or whatever. So that's when I really kind of knew, like, all right, I don't want to pay someone else's rent. I want to try to figure out how to really how to really work both ends, how to invest, but how to also, like, you know use my money a little more strategically there. And that's where I just kind of stumbled on house hacking. And once I kind of like knew that that was like a route and a thing, I was all in, all for it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Taking a step back, a lot of folks have the same, I guess, idea when they come out of college. They start a job, they rent for a period of time, and then at some point they realize, wow, like a lot of my income is just going to living. And this is not going to go down at any point. If anything, it's going to climb up. And it's great that you recognize that at an early age. So, what resources did you start off with when you first were thinking of how do I solve this problem? How do I lower my expenses?
yeah, so I was really trying to soak up as much information as possible. So I mean, there's so much good information out there. There's so much you can pay for it or you can get it all for free. Like, the information is all out there no matter what. It's just really kind of how you want to internalize it and how you learn it best and everything. So for me, I found Bigger Pockets, and then I went down that rabbit hole, and I actually went to school to college with a ex Bigger Pockets employee, Craig Gerlop, who wrote the book, The House Hacking Strategy. So I kind of, like, after, when you graduate, you like see who's kind of doing whatever, where everyone goes and all of that. And I saw he wrote this book on house hacking or whatever. And I was like, huh, like, the only reason I knew about Bigger Pockets is because I saw that he, went there for a job at some point. And I was just like, huh, what is this? Like, and just got really into it. And so read the book, loved the book. Shout out to Craig on that one. That was a great kind of um, a solid, broad resource, an easy read, like nothing crazy, but like gave you the nuts and bolts essentially. So I really was, I was full force. I was, listening to podcasts every day on the commute. I was saving what I could. I was, trying to find any sort of side hustle I could that made sense, and obviously just cut my own living expenses. I was very fortunate at the time that when I moved back to Boston, I took over someone's apartment. My now wife and I took over someone's apartment, and honestly, it was much cheaper than what it should have been, and it was much cheaper for the area. So, it did allow me to actually, save more than if I was paying, I guess, retail price or market value of what it should have been or what it should have been in the area. It would have been even more challenging. But that really allowed me to kind of just really cut back a little bit more, and figure out what I could do to get that first purchase.
That's one of the most difficult parts, right? Being able to save down and also scale back your lifestyle. So you're saving money. You're likely cutting on how often you're, buying new clothes, some of your extracurricular activities. And I'm assuming that apartment that you were first in wasn't in a luxury building, right?
No, it was in a crappy duplex. I will say it was in an awesome spot. We loved the area. It's a popular area in Boston, and or well, it's more of like a burb of Boston. Essentially, you're still like in the city limits, but it's a really cool area, and it's all relatively, for the most part, the rentals are pretty old, pretty run down, but people love the area, so they don't care, and they're starting to build more and more like luxury buildings there, but this one was just a very basic old two-bedroom, one bath. The bathroom was like literally had yellow tile on the floors, the walls, and the ceiling. So I don't know when they thought that was a good idea or why they did it, or if they just tile was so cheap that they just were like, I have to throw it everywhere in here. Like I have to make the entire room yellow and tiled. So it was nothing fancy, but we actually did, I kind of house hacked before I even knew it was, I kind of backwards house hacked before I even knew about it. And we had a friend who was living at home and commuting like 2 hours a day to her job. And, she basically had a timeline of like, oh, a couple months and I'm able to work remote because it's summertime and she worked at a university. So she didn't have to be at the university during the summer. So we said to her, hey, why don't you just rent that second bedroom and throw us, we she threw us $500 a month for a couple months, and that was also like one of my kind of like side hustles or whatever that I attempted, and it worked out great. This particular person, she was a friend of ours, and luckily, like, she honestly was never there. She really used it as like just a sleeping, place to sleep, and it worked out really well. She was really never there on the weekends, and even when she was there, like, the place was, big enough that it wasn't like uncomfortable or anything. So I kind of like backwards, house hacked beforehand. So but it did help. It did, make us a little extra.
That's excellent. Yeah, kind of get into the house hacking strategy beforehand, understanding that living with others in a space can significantly reduce your costs. So, for those that are new to the term house hacking, how does this strategy differ from traditional buy and hold for investing?
Yeah, so this is what I like to refer to. I honestly think it's the best strategy to get started in real estate investing. And I may be biased, but there are a lot of people that agree with that too. And even, some big name investors, you'll hear like David Green has said it before. Like, a lot of investors will preach that if you can house hack, it is the best move to kick off your journey. And basically what it entails is, and the great part of it is, it's as creative as you want it to be. But you buy a property and you have to live in it. You live in it and you make some sort of income off of it. So whether that's renting a bedroom, on Airbnb or long term or something, or maybe that's literally renting the backyard with a trailer or something and someone's living in that, or renting the space or renting storage. It's as long as you're getting that income to basically offset some of the mortgage one way or another. And some people are so creative that they, live for free or even profit. And it's all about, the two most important things are about how creative you're willing to be and how uncomfortable you are willing to be, because it's much more, you can still to this day live for free house hacking. Like, I fully believe that, but it may entail, renting out every single bedroom, or it may entail living in the living room and renting out the bedrooms. It's not necessarily going to be like this, oh, I bought this big beautiful spot and I only have to give up a little, sacrifice a little. No, you may have to sacrifice a lot, but it's very doable. So you have to ask yourself, and you have to find that compromise of, how comfortable do I want to live, and how creative do I need to be to make this work? But even today, even with the interest rates, it still is working. It still is, people are doing it. And truthfully, I think people are going to do it even more and more, even beyond the people who want to be investors. I think it's becoming a strategy that families are doing now. Like even I, in my area, it's still it's so expensive. I live north of Boston, and it's so expensive, and I want to live there. It's just I just like it. I want to live there. And my in-laws, they want to move up there too, but it's ridiculously overpriced. And I have said to them, like, well, what if we got something with an in-law suite or an ADU or something like that, and then we can all benefit more. um so it's really just kind of how comfortable you want to be, and what you want your living situation to look like. But it is still a very, very great strategy to get started for sure.
I agree with that. There's two simple things that you mentioned, the comfortability, how much you want to profit. And when I was first looking at the strategy myself, it sounded really good. But what really made it the cherry on top was putting 5% down rather than 20% down on a traditional investment property, which is the equivalent of thousands and thousands of dollars. Another thing too with house hacking is that you can transfer it into a rental if you'd like, where you don't live in the property in the future. Could you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so that's essentially what I did. So right now I own two duplexes, and they're literally like two streets over from each other. And the first one I lived in, my wife and I lived in one unit, and we rented the upstairs, which was a identical unit essentially. And then we wanted to get another one. We lived there for almost 2 years, and I saw this strategy, and I was like, wow, this worked great. But we wanted more space. We started off, we both weren't working remote. And then by the time we ended up leaving that place, we were, because of COVID, we were both working remote. We wanted more space. We wanted to start a family. And we are like, okay, we do need to upgrade here, but we still don't want to kill ourselves with a mortgage, on a tiny little starter home, and be house poor and not be able to afford to do anything. So we're like, all right, let's get the space we want in the town we want, in the area we want, but we're going to also have rental income. So that's exactly what we did. And we kept that duplex, and it's now just a full rental. And that's the great thing. It's a strategy where it just gives you a lot of exit strategies. So if don't have any desire to be a landlord or whatever, that's fine. You don't need to keep it as an investment property. I obviously am a buy and hold kind of guy. I love the long term strategy. I think the longer you hold something, the more it kind of is going to decrease that risk a little bit. Um, but even if you just use it to upgrade to your next place, that's totally fine too. Because I mean, if you think about it, if you buy a place and say you cut your living expenses in half, and you use that other half to save for your next place, and then you also sell it and you make a profit, and I mean, it can be used that way too. But I do think that it's great to hold on. I think that it's especially someone who's interested in becoming an investor and getting more and more serious about this stuff, like hang on to it, and get the right tenants in there, and then it's not too bad.
That's what I've always heard is every investor who's ever sold their properties, they always like regret it. They're like, oh, I should have just held on and
Yep.
wrote it out. But for your first investment property, how did you actually find the location that you wanted? And also, how did you find that deal?
We were living in Boston at the time, and we knew we wanted to get something, and we loved the area that we were living in, but it was just there was no shot. So we had to go up. We had to go out a little further. We had to go a little further north. So we were at a cut. We were, we kind of narrowed down our list a little bit to places that we'd actually be happy at living in, and also we're still on the commuter rail into downtown. So, we wanted to still be close to Boston, but we didn't need to, be like in the city. We didn't need to be like walking distance to the city or anything like that. So we moved. Now we're about 30-minute train ride to the city. So, it gave us a lot more buying power. And, we hadn't even spent a ton of time in that area beforehand. It would just kind of like, it did kind of just fall into our lap a little bit. Like we had been looking for a while. This was, right before COVID kicked off, and, competition was crazy, and, we were losing everything, and we were still outbidding, and it was very frustrating for sure. And, this one we actually didn't end up getting the first time. We put in our offer, and we were the second people in line, and we didn't get it. And then the week the world shut down, they called us back and they said the guy who beat you out lost his job because of COVID. Do you still want it? And so we were just like, oh man. And now we're thinking like, okay, well, like, should we chill out like the rest of the world? Like, we have no idea what COVID's going to entail. And I was like, honestly, we just need, like, let's just take this risk, like it was a calculated risk. I knew what we were kind of getting ourselves into. I was obviously terrified about, like, you know, every working investor is terrified they're, not going to find a tenant, or they're going to find a tenant who doesn't pay, or a tenant that destroys their place and costs them thousands of dollars and blah, blah, blah. And of course I was like afraid of all that too, but I was like, okay, let's this is what we've been trying to do. Like, now it's time to do it, to take action. Like, stop talking about it, stop chasing it. Like, let's do it. So we did it, and it's just, it was a really great decision. And we, fell in love with the area more and more. And now we want to stay in that area. We really don't want to leave that area. So I don't know what that looks like for us in terms of like more house hacks or whatever. Or just going the traditional route. But yeah, it ended up working out pretty nicely.
Incredible. In the space of time when the world is pretty much frozen, you have this big decision on your plate, and instead of backing off, you made a calculated risk, thought about all the things that could go wrong, but you probably have done so much research and reading books as well, and you knew that there's always a solution. As a landlord that's dealt with a similar issue in the past, and you moved forward with the deal, which is amazing. I love how you had that switch in your mind that was just execute. Did you always have that kind of execute mind frame?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, thinking back honestly to like other big decisions I've made in my life, like, I think I do kind of have that, like, it's go time kind of mentality. But I don't think any of it is like without doing a ton of research in the background, without being very calculated. Every decision I made about, college, or getting my master's, or all that stuff, like, I don't really willy-nilly do anything. So, by the time it got to that point, I was ready. I had been learning everything I could. I'd been studying that. I was becoming a market expert. I had the right agent on my side, who understood kind of what it took to be, a successful house hacker. He'd done it himself. And, so I do have that personality of like, okay, like, when it is time to go, I'm going to do it. But that's definitely not without putting in some serious effort beforehand, and realizing that, like, I do have to prep myself for sure.
Exactly. So having that foundational knowledge, then you get into your deal, and now you have the foundation of your first house hack. So for your second house hack, was there any differences in terms of how you started to analyze these deals, or tools that maybe you created to help yourself in the process?
Yeah, so the actual process itself was different because I literally experienced two different markets. I experienced the one where the interest rates were crazy low and competition was super high and everyone was overbidding. And then when I went to go buy my second one, it was right around the time that people were getting really nervous that rates were going to shoot up. And they were, in fact, definitely starting to creep up, but they didn't go from 2 to like 10 overnight. They were gradually going up, but I was at that, right at that beginning point where everyone was just like, "Oh man, like, we need to back off. Rates are going to go crazy high now." Like, And it actually was such a blessing for me because, well, I still got in there for a 4% rate. So the rate was still fine. It was higher than the 2.9 I had in the last one, but it was still a great rate. And it actually gave me time to think about it when I toured it afterwards. I could sleep on it. I didn't have to put in an offer that day. I didn't have to go over asking. I literally went list price, which was crazy. And even today now, unfortunately, we're kind of seeing it's going back to, people overbidding and everything. But for me, what it really entailed that second time was tools wise. I wanted to be more focused on kind of analyzing it as a house hack. And one of the things I noticed the problem. So I started off using, like the bigger pockets calculator, and it was great, and it had a lot, but it had more honestly than I needed. I needed something that was a little more straightforward. I needed something that really touched on house hacking points and not necessarily investor points. So, it's a bit more generalized towards investors. So I did kind of create my own that really was more of a focus because there are differences when you're a house hacker versus you're just buying a investment property, and there's things to think about that, you know if you were buying this as a rental, that would scare you away, but if you're buying it as a house hacker, it's a different story, like the cash on cash return and stuff. It's a different story when you're living in it and you're eating up some of the potential rental profits, and thinking about the rental growth and how long you're going to live there. It's all really important to kind of know. So I did, create a calculator for myself there that I could kind of focus a bit more on, just those points for house hacker. And even today I'm still tweaking that. I'm still learning things about my journey and incorporating them into that. And I really wanted to focus too, when I got that second one, on being more efficient as a business owner, like, because this is a business. Like, when even if you're living there, like a rental property, any income you are making, like you're a business owner. So I wanted to become more efficient there. So I tried to really, even just this year, like I've tried to become less, spreadsheet focused and more looking for different tools and things like that, where I can kind of make it a little bit more seamless and, a little bit more efficient, because, I obviously want to continue to grow with my investments. And, the better you are at creating those systems and processes, the easier it's going to be to add, to your portfolio and to take care of that stuff. So, I've been really trying to focus on that this year. That's kind of been one of my bigger 2024 goals, is to really just kind of be more efficient within, my personal and business life. So,
Which is huge. You hit on the nail by saying that you have to operate your rental properties like you're running a business, because it is one. And if you have all these scattered processes and your files and different documents and everything all over the place, it's going to become very difficult, especially during tax season, which I can attest to in some of
yeah.
the earlier deals. So do you have any favorites for property management or taxes as well?
Yeah, so I've been using Stessa. So that's been pretty great for me so far. There's definitely a little bit of a shortcoming with house hacking the property, because this one that I'm currently in, it counts as partially as a business and partially as my personal um expenses and things like that. So I have noticed, and I haven't found a specific software that's definitely been able to incorporate that perfectly yet, because, like, I'm technically still paying part of the mortgage. It's not rent, but it's a contribution from the owner. So you do have to categorize things a little bit differently when you're house hacking, which is totally fine. It has become easier using that, but that's been probably the best thing that I've done for myself this year, getting that set up. And they do have a free version. I'm still on the free version. I think if for honestly two properties, I think it's fine. I know some people use QuickBooks, things like that, and honestly, it's whatever you feel most comfortable with. And it's really easy for me to go in and categorize my transactions and just double check them, and be able to see that and be able to put them to different houses, so that basically at the end of the year I can just essentially kind of just download that and give it to my accountant, and they know what to do with it. So that versus, the last couple of years it's been a lot more manual, like in Excel, trying to kind of pinpoint everything. And so I think that's been one of the best decisions that I've made this year, to really kind of focus more on software to help it just run smoother.
That's good. And Stessa also has a little like valuation where it pulls in data from Zillow, I believe. So you could see like your portfolio as it's growing too.
It does, and so it has that. So like it'll have, you can link up your mortgage account, and you can link up the Zillow account. So like you can see kind of like the net worth of it. And obviously you do have to be careful because Zillow is not 100% accurate. There is definitely a little bit of of um, a balance there. And like I said, it's not entirely perfect for house hackers. The cash flow situation on it. Like I do still have to kind of do that a little bit more manually on the back end, because like I said, I'm living there. So it's like, okay, like I'm not counting this per se, or this doesn't apply because I'm in this unit. And so it's not perfect. It has definitely some areas where it could improve, but I think absolutely. I mean, I've been recommending it to people, who just started their journey, and even people I work with, on the agency side. Like, I think it is something that I wish I did do from day one. I wish I didn't take this long to really figure that out. So,
Great. So plug in those systems early on and do know that if you're living in the property, some of the things like lawn maintenance or property management may not apply to your initial cost, but it is good to factor those in when you're looking at the deal if you do plan to rent out fully in the future. With that, Dan, one of the biggest fears that I hear newbies have is how they're going to list their property for rent and how they're going to decide on a tenant. Did you use any softwares to help you out with either of those?
so I was actually fortunate enough, and this isn't a software, but this is where I do think that it really matters who you work with, and specifically an investor friendly agent, because I was very fortunate enough that the agent I worked with was willing to basically hold my hand, that first time, and essentially, you know, guide me through that. So they actually listed it for me on the major platforms such as the Zillows and the apartments.com, and they listed it for me. They actually helped screen those people, and then I was the one who did the showings and kind of went through the decision process and things like that. So that was huge. That was something that you know again, you find the right people on your team, and it just makes everything so much easier. And the fact that they were willing to really help me do that is not something that all agents do, but I do think that that was an awesome bonus. We already closed the deal, and he's helping me get it rented out, so I think that was huge. But I do get a lot of kind of questions and DMs about that and listing and things like that. And you know I think honestly people just overcomplicate it. I think you can you use the sites. If you have an agent who's willing, you can ask them to put it on the MLS. If you have and then besides that, like if certain Facebook groups in your area, or it is kind of knowing your population and your tenant pool. If I was in downtown Boston, it's such a heavy college city, I would be putting it in those college Facebook groups, and they have those housing Facebook groups and things like that. But beyond that, you can really just use, the big players that you already know, the Zillows and the Julias and ones like that. And, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. You just really want to try to figure out, what's going to be the best system for you in terms of kind of keeping up with it. Like, am I going to be able to answer all these calls if I get a bunch of calls or emails or text or whatever, or how I want to be communicated with, or, do I just want to bite the bullet and, pay someone to do it? There's a lot of options there. I recommend definitely, trying it on your own so you learn and stuff, because I do think that once you kind of get a handle on it, like, it's not as scary as you may think. But obviously we're all nervous about, like, are we going to find the right tenants, and when are we going to get them, and how much am I going to be paying until then? So
Great suggestions. I love the one about the Facebook group as well. Every neighborhood will be different, but I love going to a neighborhood's Facebook group and just searching like rentals or rent and see people will ask like, "Oh, I'm moving to this suburb in Boston. Where should
Mhm.
I rent?" Or find a place for myself. And then people will comment, "Oh, like Craigslist has a lot of postings." And then maybe Craigslist is the main source for that
Yeah,
area. So that could really help.
yeah,
And
definitely.
Dan, would love to dive into some of the resources that you've created based off of your journey.
Yeah, so I've definitely, been pretty I'm pretty active on social media, house hack and hustle. I try to spread the good word as much as possible about house hacking. I love all things real estate. I love all things personal finance. I'm definitely a total money nerd, so I try as much as possible to, you know, help people get control of their finances, help people understand what it's going to take to house hacking, because I mean they really go hand in hand. But really making sure that you feel comfortable on your financial journey, and that you're ready to invest, and what's going to be the best strategy for you, and those people who know, like, okay, house hacking is going to be the best strategy for me. Then I love to help them out. I love to talk with them, and just try to learn more about where they are on their journey and stuff. So like I've kind of mentioned before, I you know I have my calculator, been trying to tweak that and stuff, and make it more and more like kind of house hacking specific. A debt to income ratio calculator. There, I do have a house hacking course. So, and then I try to put out stuff, whether it's to my email list or just online, in general. Just try to put out as much as I can. So I'm always interested kind of where people are in their journey, and what exactly is kind of holding them up, and where they're kind of lost, and see if I can kind of help them over that hurdle, because I do think that once you do it, you're going to be all for it. And I think it'll be one of the best decisions you ever make. It's just, it can be very, very scary to just get over that final hurdle. So, I really just try to create as much as I can content wise, to just help people do that.
Incredible. House hacking is one of those strategies that could really transform someone's life. And sometimes we see so many strategies about how to do XYZ to make thousands of dollars within a couple of weeks. But realistically, if you can kind of forego quick money and try to do a long-term strategy that could really benefit you, like house hacking, it could really help you for yourself, but also your entire family too down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And one word of advice: stay away from any of those people who think you can get rich quick, or tell you it only takes a couple weeks. I can promise you, I will tell you right now publicly, house hacking can be challenging at times, and it can sometimes, you'll forget about it. There's times where I forget I'm a landlord, and there's other times where I'm like, okay, time to just sell it and move on. But it's literally, it is so worth it, and you can continue to run the numbers, and you can continue to see kind of how it's gonna work out and everything, and what it's doing for you at the moment too. And so house hacking by far is not a get rich quick strategy. And for anyone who's thinking that it is going to be sorely sad when they find out it's not. So definitely avoid those people. If anyone's telling you it's just going to be, a quick walk in the park and you'll be rich, that's not the case at all. But it is still an awesome way to build wealth, and really really change your life for the better.
100%. Well, with that, thank you, Dan, so much. And we'll have all the links within the show notes below so you could download the spreadsheet and check out the rest of the resources that Dan has. Thanks, Ed.
Well, thank you.